So first of all, good morning to the other panelists, and let me just use the opportunity before I've been gone. When I start this elaborate discussion, I forget to also thank the Jane Foundation for really leading, because I was just saying to Basil, while this is a matter for government, it is always inspiring when you see private sector take the lead to speak about water. And so I'm going to try to have a discussion. It's really not so much should be a presentation, but you know, some of it is my own thoughts in the whole scheme of things. And we have gone through some of these issues yesterday. I think my Vice President Glaister would have spoken about some of these things. So I'm not going to rehash anything relating to regulators and how the management is. I'm just going to go straight into what I consider the issues relating to NWC. And oftentimes, you know, most of the challenges that you'll hear about is only when people in Kingston predominantly are affected because there's a drought. And again, there's also Mandeville, which is one of the most depraved area as it relates to water, ostensibly because of its location and other things. But just a quick overview of the NWC, really. We have a staff complement of just over 2,000, a customer base which has been growing up to over 500,000. Annual revenue, Jamaican dollars, 30 billion. Expenses are running close behind. And what I want to emphasize is CapEx, because in the water industry, a highly intensive capital industry, you need to have a steady flow of capital to ensure that you renew your systems and you ensure that reliability is maintained. We have over 1,000 facilities under management, and this just gives a synopsis of what is happening on a daily basis. Just about 180 million imperial gallons. I almost said 1,000. Wow. 73% of the population we assessed served by the NWC, and the rest is simple for consumption. Obviously, we are very much aware of where water is in the island, and you know, I often said from time to time, wherever water is usually where people reside, where industries are. You can check in our situation, it is not necessarily so. So most of the water is on the north, most of our population, most of the economic activities are on the south. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy there. If you look at some of the most industrial countries, London is built on the River Thames, New York has the Hudson River, etc., etc. So we have challenges by virtue of how we settle and do business, which makes it very important for us to have proper planning and how we spend those resources. So when we look at Build It, because NWC is part of that process, as part of the approval process, I try to give a simple, you know, trend in terms of what would have happened between 2016 up to presently, both in terms of applications that we would have received for water supply, as well as the number of lots that would have been contemplated through those applications. And we would have seen more or less a sinusoidal approach, I guess depends on the time. But on average, we would have been required to provide just about 5 or so million gallons of water per year for those developments. And again, these development requests is right across Jamaica. Sewerage is not so much the same. It's a little bit less, well, significantly less, as a result of the fact that where the developments are happening, and in some instances, just our major townships are sewered, but not necessarily fully covered. So that has to be understood as well. So I kind of bring the conversation a little bit around the capital city, because again, we would have seen a lot of what is happening. And just to give a little, you know, framework of how Kingston, as it relates to NWC, is total number of customers. And when we say customers, we talk about connections. It's just about 124 98% of the population is served by NWC, and that's a significant amount. Average daily water production, 45 imperial million gallons of water per day, the number of sources, and we also look at the wastewater coverage as well, and which is abysmally low. So that we can agree on. So I did an assessment to look at what is really the water that we produce, and I did a comparison of 2019 to 2020, since as those are two complete years. I started to look at 2021, but I don't think the data set would be accurate and representative of the period. And over the period, we would have an average injected into our system 168,000 meter cube of water per day. And for those who are always familiar with gallons, you just multiply this by 220 and you would get a feel of what the millions of gallons is in terms of that volume. Average supply time across the network, and I will hasten to say our average supply time prior to the intervention that we would have done was just about 18 hours per day. Now we would have moved up by 21 hours per day. And what was significant for me is what is being consumed per capita. Just about 118 liters per day is consumed by each person. And it tells you that less than 30 gallons of water is being consumed by each person on a daily basis, and that was 2019. Similarly, is the same for 2020. Again, the supply time is just in the region of 21 hours per day. I particularly share this slide because I want to emphasize that while we often follow the build it arrangement, and yes, NWC is part of that process, we also believe that under the current circumstances, there is adequate water with particular intervention, and I'll explain more as it relates to that. So where will the water come from? First of all, I mean, if you're looking at building it and you have very poor spatial planning arrangement, you really don't know where anything is going except when an application is reached to you. You have to then see whether your infrastructure is adequate and what needs to be done to support such a development. So that is a big issue from our perspective. NWC's perspective is not knowing exactly when where things are going, when it is going to happen. So in our own budget and planning, those things can be made frontal in that process. So, I look at it and say it's an entire cycle. It's not just an entity as an NWC's responsibility solely, but it also requires a number of players. I say all stakeholders, developers, householders, approvers, every stakeholder to be on board. And these are things that would have been mentioned yesterday more than once. And so I am not necessarily going to repeat what is said. But importantly, for us, we believe an enterprise, and I am one of them who, while it is embarrassing because of what happened at NWC, I'm not afraid to say that we have a problem of non-revenue water. It is a problem that needs to be addressed. It's not a problem that is going to go away, and it's not a problem that is going to be solved by adding more volume into your system, because it's only going to get worse when you start to do that. But it's a problem that I believe ought to be a sustained stream of investment to tackle this major issue. A utility, NWC, while making stride and revered and considered as a utility which others should emulate, still has its own issues. And NRW, we believe, is the largest and most significant problem that we face. So you can't have a system of having 70% or so NRW. It tells you that whatever volume of water you're producing, you're more than adequately able to address the demand that is there. In fact, it is a circle, and I heard yesterday the whole nexus between energy, water. NRW drive up your energy costs, and it is just an inefficient process. So these are some of the things that we believe in addition to. But foremost, NRW need to be tackled on a sustained way. We have declared within the NWC every customer must have a meter. It actually drives conservation at the household level, and it makes more water available to others. So we believe that that is something that we will pursue for the foreseeable future. So I want to share this because, again, we oftentimes neglect, and because it's not so much something that is seen in relation to a facility being open and so forth. But when we embarked on the NRW activity, we got a lot of negative comments. But we stuck it out, and we decided that we're pursuing it. When you look internationally, this is the way to go. Why we who are suffering from regular droughts, etc., don't pursue this activity. So we embarked on a 5-year NRW program, and so far, albeit with its own challenges, we have seen our supply time increase. We have ensured that we can reduce our pressures in our network, and the end game is that we would have been reducing our losses, which we get no revenue from, by a certain quantum. In fact, we would have reduced NRW by about 33,000 cubic meters per day, and in return, increase our bill volume. So we're getting it two ways. We're billing more people, or billing more volume of water, and at the same time, putting less water in the network, because that is what is required. And this is just some of what is happening. I did a simple assessment just to demonstrate what needs to be done. We assess social water within the corporate area to be over 5,500 cubic meters per day. While the current NRW is just about 76,000 cubic meters per day, if you look at the average cost per meter cube of water, NWC would be losing just about $18.3 million per day. If you multiply that by 365, it's over $6 billion per year. It is a no-brainer that in satisfying the build it and the water will flow arrangement, you have to make your network efficient all the time. But I want to also look a little bit outside of the corporate area, because oftentimes work that the NWC does is never usually mentioned, but you see a lot of developments happening. And one of the things that we would have done in the early 2000 is the Jamaica Water Supply Improvement Project. Very few people are aware that there is a transmission main all the way from Montego Bay up to Runaway Bay. And that is on the basis of which all those hotels could be doing direct foreign investment in Jamaica. So while NWC would have done that investment, the wider Jamaica population, and especially within that tourism belt, would have benefited. We've also done major work in Spanish Town. There is resiliency in that area. Recently, we have done Santa Cruz, so you would have seen very little problem in that rural, urban township, and as well as in Junction. In fact, there's a lot more economic activity that is now happening in that area. But when you look at planning, the development, the houses, St. Catherine is a prime area where housing are happening, you have to take in some resiliency activity. And NWC has led in that way, and hence we would have installed an artificial groundwater recharge system. I'm sure Peter, who is on this panel, may want to speak more on that. We partner with the IAEA, and this is innovative from our perspective, because we want to now use technology to assess our water resources, to see how it flows, what is the age of your water resources, how the aquifer function, how each hydrologic basin, function, And so that is groundbreaking, and we are more or less, NWC, that is the leader in the region in using stable isotope technology in doing those assessments. Again, that is how you ensure your water resource is understood so that the planning process can be supported. With NEPA and other stakeholders, we work with the IDB on a Yalas Hope River watershed project. Again, this is how watersheds are the brainchild, if you will, of where the water resources comes from. And if there are activities within those space that is deleterious to your water resource, eventually, as we would have seen and now experienced over the years, when you move your city northwards, as in Kingston, without putting in the supporting infrastructure, your water resources, especially in the Ligani Plain, is definitely affected. So much so, estimated about 5 to 6 million gallons of water unusable. We want to ensure that our action is supportive of a sustainability in those areas. This is just a synopsis of what we believe are important in ensuring that, when you look at planning, it is not just to go and put up concrete structure, but you have to look at it in an all-enclave, all-inclusive way. NWC believes, and it's part of its strategic goal, that the first thing to tackle is to reduce our losses, cut our energy costs. Eventual beneficiaries, the consumers, because if we become more efficient, the price of water is likely to go down. But I rest my case and just encourage all your viewers to follow NWC on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you.